Beirut, 1974. A passionate crowd of Arabs gathers for the funeral of one of their former leaders. Mohammed Amin al-Husseini was a controversial figure throughout his life. A man whose decisions fundamentally affected the lives of his people. At just 26, he rose to claim the title Grand Mufti, the spiritual and political leader of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs. He is a character who, even now, polarizes opinion, particularly between Jews and Arabs. To many Jews, he is a man who collaborated with the Nazis and provides clear proof that all Arabs utterly despise them. He clearly supported the extermination of millions of Jews. In his own words, he said, "Kill the Jews wherever you find them. This pleases God, history, and religion." He even went as far as recruiting Muslims to form a special division of the dreaded SS.
The Mufti, as he himself acknowledged very clearly in his memoirs, was perfectly aware of the genocide. He was perfectly aware of the fact that the Nazis were perpetrating a genocide of European Jews.
But to Arabs, he was a man simply seeking to protect his people's rights to a territory that is now no longer theirs. In fact, to many, he was a prophet who foresaw the destruction of his homeland and only wanted to defend it. So what were his motives? How much did he really support Hitler and the Nazis' intentions towards the Jews? It's not simply a matter of history, as the Grand Mufti's actions and influence have had a significant impact on the Middle East of today. Mohammed al-Husseini's story is rooted in the period in the Middle East between the First and Second World Wars. Al-Husseini was born into a family of wealthy landowners in southern Palestine, near the holy city of Jerusalem, with a long and proud history. At the start of the 20th century, the whole region was largely under Muslim control, with around 400,000 Muslims and as few as 25,000 Jews. The land had been part of the massive Ottoman Empire for 400 years. But during the First World War, the empire was broken up and Palestine was controlled by the British.
Durante la ocupación romana de Egipto, desde el 30 a.C. al 14 de nuestra era, el canal de los faraones se mantuvo y mejoró. Durante ese periodo el comercio floreció en la región. Mercantes griegos y egipcios cruzaban el desierto diariamente. Por agua por el canal y por tierra en grandes caravanas, transportaban la riqueza de Oriente para comerciar con oro romano. En el siglo VII, en la época de la dominación musulmana de Egipto, fue reconstruido por orden del califa. El canal siguió en uso un siglo más, pero el desierto lo reclamó para sí. Esta vez, permaneció enterrado durante 1000 años. El comercio se desarrolló exclusivamente por tierra en caravanas. Pero había obstáculos. Los asaltantes del desierto se cobraban muchas víctimas, y aunque se les pudiera evitar, los piratas del Mar Rojo eran una constante amenaza. En 1498 el explorador portugués Vasco de Gama llegó a la India doblando por primera vez el Cabo de Buena Esperanza. Tardó más que por tierra, pero la ruta era mucho más segura. A pesar de ese cambio, gran parte del comercio seguía haciéndose por tierra. A finales del siglo XV se rompió el eslabón egipcio en la cadena del comercio. Durante los siguientes 4 siglos, el comercio en Oriente estuvo dominado por mercantes ingleses, holandeses y portugueses que rodeaban el extremo meridional de África. Un viaje de 4 meses. En 1850, Europa estaba inmersa en la revolución industrial y experimentaba enormes cambios sociales y económicos. La vieja aristocracia perdía poder y la riqueza pasaba a manos de la nueva clase media. El comercio con Extremo Oriente ya no era un lujo. Era vital para el crecimiento económico de Europa. Las fábricas de Inglaterra y del continente necesitaban copra, yute, oro y algodón.
The British occupied Palestine during the First World War. It didn't exist as a political entity under the Ottomans. But the British decided by the end of the First World War that they wanted to dismember the Ottoman Empire. And it was quite clear to them that Palestine was of tremendous strategic significance in terms of the need to protect Egypt and the Suez Canal from any potential aggression.
During the First World War, the British had made explicit promises to the Arabs in the Middle East that they wanted a new era for the Arab people. They even sent out leaflets in Arabic, proclaiming that they fully supported the idea that Arabs should run their own countries. For al-Husseini and other politically motivated Palestinians, it meant that they were more than willing to help the British cause. Then, in November 1917, the British made a political move that has repercussions even today. They issued what became known as the Balfour Declaration. It stated that the British government now favored the establishment in Palestine of a homeland for the Jewish people. So in other words, the declaration supported the idea of a country for the Jews. There was no reference to Arabs at all. For al-Husseini, the Balfour Declaration was devastating news. And it was this that would cause him to set out on the path that would ultimately lead him to collaborate with the Nazis. He wasn't prepared to stand by and see his homeland simply given away by the British. He decided to fight. During the Muslim festival of Nebi Musa in Jerusalem, an anti-Jewish riot broke out in protest at the Balfour Declaration.
This is the first case of large-scale violence between the two communities. Al-Husseini, after the Nebi Musa riots, is accused, particularly by the Zionists, of orchestrating the entire thing. The commission that investigated the course of the riots certainly believed that al-Husseini had a part to play.
Afterwards, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison by a military court. But he avoided jail, as he'd already fled the country.
This figures as part of a larger narrative that he's a troublemaker, that the Palestinian Arabs would have been okay with Zionism if it wasn't for these extreme Palestinian Arab nationalist leaders like al-Husseini, who throughout the mandate continually drive them towards extremism and violence against the Zionists.
Then in July 1920, the British made a move that would give al-Husseini hope. They appointed their first High Commissioner to Palestine, Sir Herbert Samuel. It was an interesting choice.
He was a Liberal MP. He was the first Jewish member of the British cabinet. He was a high-profile politician. And during the First World War, he is the first person to submit a proposal to the British cabinet in support of the idea of the establishment of a Jewish state.
Despite his Zionist credentials, Samuel went out of his way to prove to the Arabs that although he was a Jew, above all else, he was fair. So he declared an amnesty for all Palestinian Arabs who had previously been sentenced by the British military. Still in exile at this point, al-Husseini could now safely return to his homeland. Then came another event that changed al-Husseini's life. His half-brother Kamal died suddenly. He was the Mufti of Jerusalem, the Palestinian Muslims' spiritual leader. His funeral was a lavish occasion attended by thousands. His death left a serious power vacuum in Jerusalem. It was a situation that the British had to resolve quickly. Samuel realized that if there was any chance of creating stability in the region, then the right person had to be appointed as the Mufti's successor. Samuel wasted no time in selecting Mohammed Amin al-Husseini to fill the role. To enhance the authority of their chosen man, the British suddenly bestowed a brand new title on him. Not only would he be the Mufti of Jerusalem, he would be the Grand Mufti of Palestine. That is the spiritual leader of not only Jerusalem's Muslims, but of all Muslims in Palestine. It was a job for which he was barely qualified.
The kind of education that would be relevant to the post of Mufti is, of course, religious education, theology. And he didn't achieve this. He started, but he interrupted to go to serve in the army in the First World War and never resumed this education. So he has to be someone who very much learned in the Islamic theology, and that was certainly not the case with Amin al-Husseini. So this person who was designated as the Mufti of Jerusalem and Grand Mufti of Palestine by the British authorities in 1921 was barely 26 years old, so very, very young person for the job.
He was such an unlikely choice that even his own people didn't think him fit for the job.
He was not even part of the 3 persons that were selected according to the normal procedure by the community of religious persons in Palestine for the job. So he was just picked by the British High Commissioner for Palestine, Herbert Samuel, who happens to be a Zionist himself, actually, who picked just Amin al-Husseini and designated him in this job that the British authorities had renamed Grand Mufti of Palestine in order to stress the fact that this was the highest spiritual authority on the territory of their mandate.
But despite his lack of qualifications, al-Husseini took office on May the 8th, 1921. And from then onwards, his power and authority seems to keep on growing.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Within a year, he'd been elected president of the Supreme Muslim Council. At the age of just 26, he was now both the religious and political leader of the Arab community in Palestine, making him a hugely powerful player in the politics of the Middle East. At first, what looked like a high-risk appointment initially seemed to work. Al-Husseini worked hard to keep the peace. Towards the late 1920s, there were regular violent clashes between Palestinian Arabs and Jews. Jewish properties and even synagogues were attacked and destroyed. but the Grand Mufti was often seen attempting to restore order during the violence.